with hand frame, intervals, bowing, in between fingers, ghost fingers. With all of these things put together, we're finally ready to take a look at one of the most widely respected methods for shifting. This is the Yost Method. Hi, my fellow instrumentalists. This is a continuation on my series, The Mechanics of Shifting. The goal of this series is to help anyone playing a shoulder instrument discover what it is we can specifically think about and do to accomplish shifting in a more consistent and more fundamentally sound way. I can't promise you'll be perfect, but I can promise that if you do your study and you do your practice using these tools, you're going to go from here to here a little better. So, what is the Yost method? Well, Gaylord Yost was some kind of amazing pedagogue. Actually, I'm not going to give you the history. All I know is that quite a few of my teachers made a big point about it, and I definitely understand why. I constantly refer to this idea and this method whenever I hit a roadblock in my practice, and I highly recommend that you use it moving forward when you're establishing your understanding of any shift. I do have some bad news though. It is a pretty thorough method and it can take a very long time. In fact, any specific shift, if you want to use this method properly, will easily take at least 5 minutes, if not more, to actually thoroughly go through it. And that won't even make you a master of the shift afterwards. It'll just give you a pretty good understanding. So with that in mind, if you had a piece that, say, had 50 shifts in it, by that math, it'll take you a minimum of 4 hours to look over each of those shifts with this method. Now, I don't say this to discourage you. I say it rather to give you an idea of the real commitment that you're making to developing your shifting. Because, like anything good, this is not a simple task, or definitely not an easy one. Now, on to the method. The method, like many things we've discussed, is actually really simple. It's really easy to understand, but like everything, it's hard to implement. As we've been doing, let's take the shift from first position to third position. In this case, we're going to be going from a B natural to a D sharp because we're going to be thinking on the A string in terms of E major. Now, understanding your key and making sure that you know what it is really important for the success of this method. And that's because we're going to be playing all the notes within our hand frame on any given string. That's because the method takes us through all combinations of fingers between each position. The idea behind this method is that within a single key signature, within a single string, it does not matter what combinations of fingers you use. A shift is always going to be identical. So in this case, when we move from first position to third position, it doesn't matter if we do second finger to first finger, third finger to third finger, third finger to fourth finger. It will always essentially be the same shift that our hand completes. Doing this method helps reinforce that idea and actually trains our body to understand it. So the method is simple. We're going to shift between these positions with every single possible combination of two fingers. We're going to start with first finger and work our way to fourth finger in the starting position. So we're in the key of E major, and we're going to go first finger and all of its combinations with the next position. So first finger to second finger, first finger to third finger, first finger to fourth finger. Then we move on to second finger combinations, and so forth. So just to give you an example, here are the first finger combinations. When first using this method, I recommend you focus on just using old bow shifts. Now, some things to think about before you jump into one of these methods. I just kind of showed you what I would do, but you want to answer these questions. What position are you starting and ending in? In this case, we're starting in first position, and I'm going to define it for myself as going into third position with like a high first finger. What kind of bow are you going to use, old or new? I'm going to be using an old bow, and I recommend you do the same. What happens to the in-between fingers? Now this one takes a little longer to answer. First and second finger, their relationship changes. Second and third, stays the same. 3 and 4 expands. So having those answers is important. And then making sure you know which fingers are responsible for your shift. Remember we talked about in one of the previous videos, which finger are you using to lead the shift? In other words, which finger is inextricably linked to the double contact? In this case, since I decided I'm thinking about third position with a high 1, we can't use first finger. Instead, we're using second finger, understanding that C sharp moving to a regular third position, and that first finger is actually, as you can see, now above that thumb contact point. If you're having any trouble following this at all, please feel free to revisit some of the older videos. For example, this bit of information about the first finger's relationship to the thumb is expressly explained in the hand frame videos. And if that's not enough, you can always leave a comment below asking me to further explain, and I'd be happy to get back to you. Finally, when you've answered what the in-between fingers do, the last thing to consider is what finger memory you want to use for the shift. Now, since we define the shift as being between first position and third position, the most logical options to choose from are either the third finger or the fourth finger, as establishing a ghost from which to bear reference. I recommend you use the fourth finger in this situation because, remember, we're using the second finger in this case to actually establish the shift, because the second finger is the finger that is retaining its relationship to the double contact and position, whereas the first finger is compromising during the shift. Well, as you can expect, as we get towards the end of this series, the stuff that we talk about is getting a little bit more complex. Bear with me though, make it to the end of the videos, and if there's anything that's still confusing, please feel free to leave a comment below, and I'd be happy to elaborate or make additional videos after this series to help explain some of these concepts in a more thorough way. The last thing I want to mention about the Yost method is that the whole purpose of it is, regardless of what finger combinations you use, you want to make sure that as you travel through the exercise, the shift, in other words, the position of your double contact and how it moves, is no different regardless of the combinations you choose. So 3 to 1 should look no different in the double contact than 1 to 1. If you like what you're seeing and you think it's at all useful, please consider subscribing so you don't miss next week's video, where we'll finally take all of what we're learning and we'll look at a piece of music. Well, not something that's really like a piece of music. It's an etude. I know nobody likes etudes, but it's super useful, and we're going to be taking a look at it. And if you have time between now and then, go ahead and get yourself a Kreutzer etude book, because we're going to be using that to look at our next exercise.